Crucial, I think, to literally thousands of people, maybe many thousands of people, was a publication called Famous Monsters of Filmland, edited by Forrest J. Ackerman, which long before I was actually old enough to sneak in and see a Hammer film, I was 11 or so, I could luxuriate in these wonderful images of Christopher Lee dissolving into ashes, and better still, these fabulous stills from the Universal films of the 1930s. I gather, as was mentioned yesterday, the only character who rivals Dracula for a number of appearances on screen is Sherlock Holmes. I think Dracula wins, but as you see, we have the Basil Rathbone and Holmes and Watson here, and this is my worst pun ever. Good old Holmes, of which inner organs has this vampiric stolen this time? Alimentary, my dear Watson.
Kim Newman, author of Anna Dracula, who was with us yesterday, writes that the vampire not reflecting in a mirror used to be among the most commonplace of undead traits, like drinking blood or sleeping in a coffin. But now the old not visible in a mirror trick has somewhat fallen out of favour. Indeed, even the more arcane law about not being able to cross a threshold, which I've been talking about, unless invited in, thanks to Let the Right One In, is now more common in film and fiction. If you're trying to fit vampires into something resembling our universe, representing vampirism as a blood disease, a lifestyle choice, a sexual kink, or a parasitic species mimicking humanity, then the mirror thing is just embarrassing magic. I'm just going to give you an example of this. So for a while, the mirror was connected with the vampire's problems with silver, a trait that was actually borrowed from werewolves, in that mirrors and photography used to rely on silver. My aim was to take the phenomena back to its beginnings, to examine the Dracula notebooks in the Rosenbach Museum, Stoker's research notes for the novel, and to simply pose the question, did Stoker sit down at his desk one day and invent the mirror non-reflection motive? In many cultures, the shadow and the mirror image in particular, are both unmistakably associated with the soul. Dracula throws no shadow and makes no reflection. He has no soul, as physical existence and appetite are really all that concern him. In eastern Siberia and Manchuria, the same word is used for shadow, soul and reflection. And in these cultures, shadow and image, including the photograph, are part of a person and not just optical phenomena.
So Bram Stoker's Dracula is the seminal text for today's paranormal romances because of the yearning he sets up of desire between vampire and human, the striking interbreeding of discordant genres and the instability of questions of knowledge and verification, themes that all feature so heavily and are, as I hope to have shown, imbricated with each other.
I like scary vampires just as much as the next person, but I also kind of like the not scary ones as well. I like the comic ones and the romantic ones, and I really feel it doesn't have to be either or. You don't have to choose between the two. You can like the scary ones and you can like the comic ones as well. Dracula in Stoker's novel is defiantly humorless, and he tells Jonathan Harker that, and I quote, "I seek not gaiety nor mirth, not the bright voluptuousness of much sunshine and sparkling waters which please the young and gay. I am no longer young, and my heart, through weary years of mourning over the dead, is not attuned to mirth. Moreover, the walls of my castle are broken, the shadows are many, and the wind breathes cold through the broken battlements and casements. I love the shade and the shadow, and would be alone with my thoughts when I may." Jonathan, however, is uneasy with this speech, and he considers that somehow his words and his look did not seem to accord, or else it was that his cast of face made his smile look malignant and saturnine. So the disjunction between the Count's professed melancholy and his malignant smile, his saturnine smile, is the space where I'm going to argue vampire humour emerges. And in this case, it's a joke that neither Jonathan nor indeed the reader is in on. It unsettles rather than amuses.
I believe I live a blameless life, a life above suspicion. Oh dear. My life has been rather fraught with terrors and disasters, and it still is. I seem to have the knack for drawing into my orbit people and things, events and occurrences that can only be described as macabre.
And there's no doubt in my mind that Elsa Manchester's headdress is Nefertiti's crown. Zimmerman, who's a zoologist, This is 4 years before The Nightmare was exhibited, 3 years before it was painted. A zoologist writing about the crossbreeding of the species in 1778, pre-Darwin. It is not entirely impossible that an orangutan could breed with a human being to produce a kind of middle species in between. It has come to my attention that recently in London such an attempt was made. A male orang was offered to a female prostitute who was paid for it, but as far as I know, this attempt was completely fruitless. The attempt was not condemned or banned on moral grounds, but failed on physical grounds, because an equally bad result would in all probability have happened if a human being had tried to mate with such a female. In addition, one knows how very excitable monkeys can be during intercourse, which suggests possibly a premature ejaculation, and this may in fact have been the case. So if this experiment were to stand any chance of success, it would have to involve a male human and a female orang. Whether this should ever happen, though, I leave to the moralists to decide. So this may, the nightmare, going back to whether it was an ape, may actually have been a reference to this experiment in London in the crossbreeding of the species, because there was a lot of proto-evolutionary writings about monkeys and humans. So if we are related, why can't we crossbreed? In the late 18th century. So, and in fact, I've done an article about this. Rousseau's Noble Savage was probably an orangutan, a man of the woods. It's a kind of evolutionary fable which people have assumed was a human being. Anyway, a classic example of visualising the Gothic. I could have done a similar lecture on Munch's Scream, which would have taken you from the Scream to the Scream films, where they all wear masks and all the rest of it in a very postmodernist way. But this, I think, is less obvious because no one's pointing it out to you. In the case of Scream, they're saying, "This is Munch, aren't we clever?" Whereas in this, it's just there. It is the way you do it. So, visualising the Gothic, something that, just as Gothic started off as literature and ends up as secular myth, I think in the case of the history of art, it starts off with painting in the Royal Academy and ends up as the way of visualising nocturnal visitors like vampires.